Okay, once you plug the unit in, it's going to tell you what mode it's in. This one's in a seconds mode at 10%. That's exactly what we want for this unit, but we want it to say 5 seconds, 10%. Now, the system will come with the keypad locked as well in the standby mode, so we need to unlock it. To unlock it, you hold the mode and the percentage button at the same time. And then you'll see it'll only say standby then. Now, we want to take it off standby mode too, because the pump will still not work on standby. So then we're going to hold the mode and the standby, and standby will go away. And that's exactly what we want. We just want to see 5 seconds and then a percentage mark. So we're going to change this from 1 second to 5 seconds. So we're going to hold the mode button and use the up arrow and go to 5 seconds. And then we're going to go to 5 seconds and we're going to go to 100% because we want this to be at full power at 5 seconds. So to change the percentage level, you hold the percent button and then use the up arrow. We're going to take it all the way up to 100 because we want to overdose with peroxide first and then slowly run it back. So we'll run this up to 5 seconds, 100%. Okay, once that's set, then this is pretty much ready to go now. We can go ahead and just slide the cover back on, but you don't want to screw it down yet because we're going to have to make adjustments to this during the startup. So once it's on 5 seconds, 100%, you can leave it there, and then we'll move on to the next aspect of the install. Okay, now we're going to basically get ready for our startup procedure. So to do that, we want to put our filter in our sediment filter housing. So we're going to spin down this sump and make sure your O-ring's in place. And then if you have some grease left, go ahead and put some grease on the O-ring. You're going to take your filter out of the plastic. And then you can look in the filter housing. There's a little like nub at the bottom that this hole is going to fit over, and that's what centers it in the housing. There's also a ring that cuts in here, and that's what seals it off too. So when you put this in, make sure it falls on that nub, and it should be below the top of the housing. If you get done and it's stuck up like that, then it's not on the nub properly. So make sure it's all the way down inside there. And then once you do that and you put some lube on the O-ring, it's not a bad idea to put a little lube on these threads too if you have some extra. So go ahead and put that on there, and then you can spin this up by hand. It should spin up that easy. If it doesn't, then you have a problem. Snug it down by hand. Take the supplied filter wrench and go ahead and snug it maybe another 1/8 of a turn, just snug it. You don't really need to crank it down super tight. Now, when we start putting water to the unit and checking everything, we're going to get the carbon prepared first, but when we put water to the unit, we're going to come back and we're going to push this red button down, and this red button is what actually lets the air out of this and fill up with water. Sometimes you can get an air pocket in here and water will just run through the bottom of the filter, so you waste the whole rest of the filter that's not even being used. So you want to make sure you let all the air out of the system when you start it up. So now we have that installed. I want to go over and we're going to plug in the carbon filter. We're going to prepare everything on it and get ready for an installation, and then we'll turn the water on and start talking about how to actually adjust everything out. So now that we're at the carbon filter, we want to make sure first of all that the carbon filter is in the bypass position. The bypass position is indicated when these red handles are facing each other this way. When they're both like this, that's in service, but when they're like that, that means it's bypass. So we want to put it in the bypass position first and foremost. From there, we're going to go ahead and take our power cord that's supplied with the unit and plug it into our power pigtail, and you'll see the unit come on. Now, these units are pre-set for 10 minutes backwash, 10 minutes rinse. I don't recommend that you change that at all. This is something that we've done for years and it's worked tried and true. We've tried to manipulate it sometimes, and if you get to the point where you load this thing up with with iron. The only way to bring it back is to run the peroxide at 100%, like 3 or 4 days, and backwash, and you waste a lot of money in peroxide to fix it. So the amount of time and days you can shave off of this is, in most cases, not worth it when it comes to peroxide cost. So don't get skimpy on this. Don't try to get too conservative, because if you do, you're probably going to load this filter up and run yourself into problems. So when we plug this in, it's going to be, like I said, the cycle times are programmed. So the only thing we really need to program is the date and the time, as well as the days between regenerations. Now, for people that are somewhere around, let's say, 1 part per million of iron, you might be able to get about 5 days between backwashes. But if you're in the 2 to 4 range, you should probably do every 3 days. Anything over 4, I would recommend every 2 to every 1 day, just to make sure that you don't load this thing up with iron. So once you plug it in, you're going to push and hold the settings button. And when you do that, you'll see a cursor show up over the time hour. You'll set the time to your hour, push the settings button, release. It'll go to the minutes. You set that to your minutes. And then you set PM or AM 12-hour cycle. And once that's set, hit the settings button, set the years, 2016. The month is October. The day is the 27th. And then the regen days. Now, let's say for this particular application, we have, 2 parts per million or so. So we're going to just go to every 3 days on here. So we'll use the up arrow and change this to 3 days. Then we'll hit the settings button again, and we come to a parameter that says gallons. Now, we do not use this parameter at all. If you put a value here, if you put anything other than the word off here, it's going to beep and throw an alarm, and it's going to drive you crazy when you try to go to sleep at night. So make sure you don't do anything but off for gallons. This has nothing to do with this particular unit. This software has to do with another type of backwashing filter that is available. So, but for this particular unit, you're going to put the gallons to off. Press and release the settings button, and then you go to regeneration time, which means when this is going to backwash. Now, if you have a softener in the home, there's a good chance it's going to backwash at 2 a.m. So, or regenerate at 2 a.m. So backwashing filters, I usually bring those back to 1 a.m. As long as you're in bed at that time. You don't want to be using water while this thing is backwashing. And it's going to backwash for about 20 to 25 minutes and rinse. So I usually put it to 1 o'clock. That way, if the softener does regenerate, this is completely done before the softener starts to regenerate. If this and the softener regenerate at the same time, first of all, you may not have enough flow rate to backwash this properly, but second of all, this will be putting bad water to the softener. So you'll be backwashing the softener with dirty iron water. So it's crucial that these be offset. So I'm going to change this to 1 a.m. We're going to assume that there's an actual softener in this application. Then you hit the settings button again, and it'll say programming complete. Now, you're pretty much done with programming this unit. The only thing that we would change is if we find that maybe we need to extend the days a little further or so. Every once in a while, it's not a bad idea to make sure the time is correct. If the time gets off and this thing regenerates during the day when you're using water, then you're going to get bad water coming through your system. So make sure your time of day stays right, so that way it's backwashing at the 1 a.m. when you're asleep. Now, if you're working night shift, that may be 1 p.m. that you need to set this to. Basically, you just want to make sure this is about an hour after you go to bed, and your softener is about 2 hours after you go to bed. That's how you want to set them up. Now, once this is in place, we're in bypass here. We got our filter in. We're going to slowly turn the water onto everything, and we're going to check for leaks. We're going to turn the water on slowly, and then we're going to open up a spigot downstream. We're going to let water run through everything and through the bypass, but it's just not going to run in this tank yet because we're in bypass. So we're going to do that, and we'll turn the water on. And like I said, this is a mock startup, so I don't have water going to this. But once you turn the water on, you have no leaks anywhere, and the spigot downstream is running with no air coming out of it, no kind of debris or discoloration. Then that's at the point where you put a bucket under here, and you're going to push this button and hold it down until you just get water only coming out of here. That'll ensure that this whole housing fills up with water at the top and you don't have an air pocket up here. So once you've done that, that's in place and we don't have any leaks anywhere, we know we're good, you can shut the water off downstream and stop the water flow. From there, the only other thing that we really need to do here is bring the water into the carbon filter. Now, when we're running the water and we're checking all this, the water's going to run through this meter and it's going to kick this pump in and make this pump run. So the fact that it's cycling while we're just flushing or whatever, that's great. That's what we want. We want to make sure we get some good peroxide into everything before we introduce it to this tank anyway. So this thing should be cycling while we're doing this. If it isn't, check your connection points again and check your settings. Make sure you're not on standby or anything like that. But once it's running and we shut the system or the spigot off down line, then we're going to bring this online. So to do that, we're going to put this into a backwash. We want this unit to be in a backwash so we can fill the tank from the outside, go through the tube, up, and then out to the drain. It'll blow all the discolored water from the carbon as well as any air out this drain line. The carbon, when you first put it in there, it's going to create a drain water that looks somewhat like tinted glass, just because there's some actual dust and fines in the carbon that you have to flush out. So that's the main reason that we do this first. But it also allows the air to come out of the system. So to put this into a backwash, there's a button here called manual. You're just going to push and hold that button. And then it'll say regen immediately. Once it says that, then it'll say advancing to backwash. Now, when it stops, it'll stop and it'll say backwash and it'll start counting down from 10 minutes. And when that happens, that's when we're going to actually start to introduce water into the tank. So we'll just wait until the valve rolls around. It'll say backwash. It'll start counting down some time. Okay, this one was actually on a different time. This is one that we had sitting over here. But once it starts counting down time, we're going to slowly open this inlet bypass valve. So you're going to turn it clockwise and you're going to open it up maybe a quarter turn and you'll hear water start coming in here. Now, when the water's coming in, if you start hearing a really violent knock and stuff, that's usually an indication that you're letting the water in too fast. In that case, you would just back the water off a little bit. So what we're going to do is over this 15-minute period, we're going to slowly let this water in until we get water coming out of here, and air is going to be coming out too. You're going to keep putting this open until it's fully open, and then you're going to watch this and you're going to wait until it runs clear and there's no more air coming out. Now that usually takes the whole backwash cycle, and then from the backwash cycle it'll automatically advance to rinse and it'll say advancing to rinse. When it does that, then basically now we reverse the flow and we're pushing water down through and we're going to rinse everything that we've backwashed out. So it takes a while for the unit to get from backwash to rinse because the cantilever has to turn all the way around, so it'll take a few minutes here. But once it gets all the way to rinse, you're going to let it rinse for the entire rinse cycle until it's done. Once it's completely done and you have no air in it or anything down line, then that's when we would go back to start actually adjusting the peroxide. So while that's getting to rinse, and we're just going to assume that it rinses the rest of the way and it's done. While that's doing that, I want to talk about what we call the bubble method. What we're looking for when we do peroxide injection is we want a little bit of a residual peroxide left in the water after the carbon filter. Not enough that it's aesthetically unpleasing or it's taking over the water chemistry, but enough that we know that we've had enough injection to oxidize everything and just a little bit left over. The good thing about peroxide, if you have a little bit left over, it'll dissipate from the water. It's not like it'll stay in the water and cause a problem. If you have a whole glass of water laden with peroxide, it'll look like Alka-Seltzer. But you'll see that fizz will rise to the top and slowly go away, and then it'll become crystal clear. And that's the air coming out of the actual water that you've injected when you put in the peroxide. So that is our goal first. When we first have this online, everything's done backwashing. Then we go ahead and open up our outlet bypass, and then now we can go downstream and open up a faucet. So as this is running with the faucet open downstream, this thing's going to be injecting at 100% and just be putting a lot of peroxide in there. So what we want to see is we want this thing to inject until down the line we get a glass, and we usually want a glass so you can see through it. But you get a glass and you take a sample from there and you hold it, and it should just look like a big Alka-Seltzer full of fizz. And once you have that, then that's when we can come back to this actual pump and start reducing this percentage until we get to our sweet spot of peroxide injection. So usually what I do is once I have that Alka-Seltzer look, then I'll come back to this, hold my percentage button, and start coming down in 5% increments until I pull my sample. I see a few little defined bubbles in the middle of the water that come to the top and dissipate immediately, and it's crystal clear within, you know, a second to 2 seconds. That's usually where your sweet spot is. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, that kind of sounds, I don't know, made up. And for the most part, it is. And I'm going to tell you why. The main reason why is because if you get a peroxide test kit and we try to do residual peroxide testing to dial this in, it may take us 3 days because the test itself is so long, and then you got to go back and revisit it and wait till it comes back. And I can tell you this, if you use this bubble method properly and you do it the way I say, that there's a good chance that you're going to do better than you ever would with a test method just by using your eyes. And this is not rocket science in the fact that we're not looking like for a precise measurement so much. We're just making sure we get enough with a little bit left over to make sure we knock out the contaminants. So if you want to get a residual peroxide test kit and go that route, you can. We're looking for somewhere around a 0.5 part per million of residual after the carbon filter. But it's not something I recommend for the run-of-the-mill application. You can usually do it with the bubble method and use the visual method, and it works just fine. So again, you're going to over-concentrate, then you're going to slowly dial back in 5% increments until that glass of water just has a few defined bubbles in the middle that come to the top and dissipate within a second or so. That's usually your sweet spot. Now, from that point on out, you should be iron and sulfur free. This system will oxidize some manganese and remove some, but on high levels of manganese, you still may need a softener afterwards to polish that manganese off. Manganese responds to ion exchange quite a bit better than oxidation. So although this will help, it's not really the solve for manganese problems. You should still have a softener afterwards to polish that off the rest of the way. Now, we've talked about installing this. We've talked about setting it up. I want to talk about maintenance a little bit. And I also want to talk about pre-install maintenance. Now, if you're in a home that you've been dealing with iron and iron bacteria and sulfur and things like that, your home is probably full, as far as your plumbing system is full of that bacteria. So part of installing this system, we always recommend that you shock your well as well as all your plumbing in your home. We sell a well safe shock kit that you can get on our site. It runs about $20, something like that. But you want to chlorinate everything before you put this online. Because what can happen is although this is going to create good water going out, if you have bacteria down the line, bacteria will grow back towards the unit, and then you'll end up with a smell and problems again. So you want to make sure you flush everything completely, then put this system online, and then that should control it in the future where it doesn't build up anymore. But when you flush it, you want to flush every line. If you have a dead-headed line that's just hanging over in the crawl space somewhere and doesn't do anything, cut that out and get rid of it, because that's just a petri dish sitting there waiting to grow organics and bacteria. The other thing to remember too is, although you may not have a lot of sediment and things like that, and you can take these fillers out and rinse them, I don't recommend it, especially not in a setting where we know we're dealing with ferrous iron or we're dealing with some type of bacteria or some type of a sulfur smell. Actually, this can be a source of a smell. If you run this too long, this itself will cause the smell to go down line because it's so concentrated with it. So no matter what, I would change this at least once a year. If you have a real bad situation where you get a lot of ferric and this thing is solid orange or full of like clay-like red stuff, then you may want to do this every 2 to 3 months. Just depends on what your particular application is. So all this is covered in the manual, but we also have people here to help you in tech support. We have people here 6 days a week from 8 to 5 Eastern, and then after 5, we have some limited tech support till 8 p.m. Eastern. but then we also have videos as well as the manuals online that'll help you after hours. This has been the installation of the Fusion Oxi-Gen system. Like I said, one of my favorite systems. I hope this helps, and I hope you enjoy your water. P.S. I am ugly. My hair is long. I need a haircut. These fittings, you can buy them cheaper somewhere else, or you can get a cheaper fitting. I say what not a lot, but the employees here think I'm badass and my wife loves me.